Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons, and this is the Thanksgiving week on the EarthWorks podcast. And I wanted to come on and say thank you and let everybody know how incredibly grateful we are for all the support that we've gotten over the last 40 years of being in business. We're very proud of the fact that we've been able to establish the concepts of biological soil management in the turfgrass industry, our industry. And we're very excited to have more guests on as we continue the EarthWorks podcast. We're now well over 250 podcasts. And most of the folks that we've had on the podcast are believers of biological soil management. So if you haven't listened to many of our podcasts, please go into the archives and you can find some really good interviews from one of our podcast team members. But again, I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you and let you know how grateful we are. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with family and friends. And because it is Thanksgiving, we too here at EarthWorks are going to spend some time with family and friends. So this week, we're going to run an old podcast, one of the very first ones, and actually one of my very favorites. It's with my very dear friend, John Chassard, who is the superintendent, has been the superintendent for well over 30 years at Lehigh Country Club in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a William Flynn design, and absolutely one of the best kept secrets in all of golf. So hopefully you will enjoy listening to John and me talk from a number of years ago. And again, I wish everybody the happiest and safest of holiday weekends. And please enjoy time with your family and friends. And we are so grateful for all your support. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, this is Joel Simmons. Welcome to this installment of the EarthWorks podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing a longtime friend, dear friend from many years ago, Mr. John Chassard, who is the superintendent at Lehigh Country Club. A wonderful William Flynn design. We'll talk a little bit about the design of Lehigh Country Club and how special it really is. I also had a chance to talk to John about a couple of soil-related issues and his philosophy in biological soil management. But what I really wanted to talk to John about was his incredible longevity of staff and how he's been able to maintain his staff for so long. So I hope you enjoy today's EarthWorks podcast with Mr. John Chassard of Lehigh Country Club. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons. This is the EarthWorks podcast. We are interviewing a lifelong friend. Is that better?
That's better.
Lifelong friend, John Chassard. John is the superintendent at Lehigh Country Club in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Has been there for a very long time. John and I, like I said, go back a long time. You were actually one of my very first customers, going back in the early 90s when we were both very young men and had hair that was attractive, and we thought we were good-looking people at that time, didn't we?
We didn't have the pandemic look going on.
No, we didn't have this COVID beard thing going on at all, which is kind of sad.
Otherwise known as laziness. So
yes, pretty much what it is. But it's a good look for both of us at our
it is
ages. But
at our advanced years.
John and I have, for the last, about a year or so, we've been trying to have a monthly lunch meeting, which ends up basically just being a complaint session and a couple too many glasses of wine, but it's always good to catch up. So I asked John to come and join us today and tell us a little bit about who he is and what he does. And I've had to prep him a number of times to keep him from saying things about me that I don't want people to know, but I think we can get through this without any problem.
You're pretty transparent, Joel. No, you are. So
I'm trying to be anyway.
Pretty much what you see is what you get.
That's pretty much all you got. So let's talk about you. How long you been at Lehigh Country Club? We're going to talk a little bit about this course, which I think is the best kept secret in much of Pennsylvania. And it's just a beautiful William Flynn design golf course, Lehigh Country Club. And how long have you been there? You've been there since you were like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, something like that?
It was 5.5.
Yeah.
And I was actually conceived on the golf course. Now, I was conceived on a golf course, but it wasn't.
I believe that. Not Lehigh, though.
But no, I've been at Lehigh for 37 years. So started in April of '83.
And what role did you start? You were a sweeper?
I was actually doing an internship up at Long Island at what started out as a Creek Club and then ended up being a Rockaway Hunt Club for Nick Brodziak. And I got a phone call when I just had started up there from the superintendent at Silicon Valley, who I had worked under for a couple of years. And he told me about Lehigh Country Club and they were looking for an assistant. Glenn Smickley was leaving and he put a good word in for me and thought I should talk to him. I said, Lehigh Country Club, where's that? I'd never even heard of it. And it was literally grew up 5 miles as the crow flies about from it. So
that's how secret this club is that nobody that even really lives in the neighborhood knows about this.
It really was interesting because I had never heard of it. So I drove down and I met with Marty Nedenicek, and he basically said, listen, why don't you finish out your internship here? And when you finish at school at Penn State, you can come out of school and be the assistant superintendent. So I packed up my bags from Long Island and came on down. Rest is history.
This is really other than a little internship, really the first real job you've had.
Yeah. I had interviewed at numerous other clubs. I've been with Marty for 4 years and then started looking. Interviewed at Lebanon Country Club. Actually turned that job down because we couldn't come to agreement. Same thing at Doylestown. And well, I feel I was fortunate because, about a month later, Marty took a job down at Burning Tree in DC, and they gave me the rest of the summer to kind of probationary period to see how things went. And I didn't kill too much grass that year, but
there's been a few years since then, though. But yeah,
there's been a few years since then. I've become very good at killing grass. So
this was what year?
That was '87.
So in '87, you've been an assistant superintendent for less than 6 months, and now you're the superintendent at.
I had started in '83. Marty left in '87, so I was the assistant.
So it's okay. So 4 years. Gotcha.
So, but I was interviewing everywhere from Maine to North Carolina, trying to find a job.
Tell me about Lehigh Country Club. William Flynn design. Has it been touched much? Talk a little bit about William Flynn and how great he is. I think he's one of the best architects ever, but I'm biased, obviously.
I mean, it's obviously his more notable golf courses. You have Cherry Hills out in Denver. You have Shinnecock up in Long Island. But his home was Philadelphia. So obviously around here, great company, Philly Country Club Manufacturers, Rolling Green, Lancaster Country Club. I mean, there's a whole host of them. Huntington Valley, Woodcrest, Bala. So yeah, there's quite a few. But Flynn, back then it was an ideal situation because pretty much could seek out the best ground for what they wanted to do. I mean, land was available. And Lehigh started out as a little 9-hole course over in Bethlehem. And when the clubhouse strangely burnt down, they decided to relocate out to the country, and they hired Flynn, bought up, I think it's about three farms that they bought to create the golf course and where it sits now. And beautiful piece of property. He had a lot to work with. 5 holes run along the Little Lehigh River. There's about 100-foot elevation change throughout the golf course. Really, really well done. I mean, that was one thing that Flynn was great at, was utilizing the land. So
this is what year?
That was in 1926.
So obviously back then, as was with the Ross properties, I mean, there's not a whole lot of equipment to be moving land.
Right. Drop bottom wagons and horses. Yeah. So that's, basically scraped up the soil to build the greens. So, and they still are soil-based greens. So
yes. Oh, they are?
There's been some confusion.
I didn't know that. I thought for sure they were all sand. This is a running joke John and I have had for probably now 30 years. What's your sand grades? Oh, I don't have any sand grades. Oh, that's right. I'm the agronomist on the team, right? Tell me about, has there ever been any redesign or any real rework architecturally on that property?
Nothing major other than the occasional grounds chairman coming in and trying to screw up things. They planted,
I'll edit that out.
they planted a bunch of trees in the 50s that kind of already, screwed up a lot of things as well. But, we've been on a pretty aggressive tree program for the last 10 years, made a lot of improvements that way. And they weren't good trees either, obviously. White pines, Norway spruces, what was inexpensive at the time. But, architecturally, there was nothing majorly done. And that one thing that I always thought was kind of really nice about Lehigh is it was pretty much in its purest form. There was a couple little things, but nothing major. So it was nice.
Yeah, it's a stunning property. And like you said, you've got the little Lehigh running through that. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know a couple of years ago, you had a lot of work done on that stream that runs through the property. What was the purpose of that? How bad? I know you were getting a lot of flooding. That's something I think a lot of golf course superintendents deal with is, streams running through rivers, running through properties that are constantly flooding. What was that project and what was the impact?
Yeah, it started out obviously because our banks were eroding. The stream was getting wider. It was starting to threaten some of the infrastructure of the club, meaning some tee banks and even infringing on our 13th green. So we felt like we had to do something. So we partnered up, and fortunately, there are neighbors. They're right upstream from us, the Wildland Conservancy in the Lehigh Valley here, and got hooked up with Mark Gutschall at Land Studies down in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. So we worked with Mark. We worked with the Chris Cucker over at the Wildlands Conservancy, and basically came up with a stream bank restoration plan. And at the time, we were very fortunate because Pennsylvania still had money and they had a lot of grants available. So, we had a good portion of the project paid for by the state. And then Land Studies kicked in some, Lehigh Country Club kicked in some, and the Wildlands kicked in some. So it was truly a partnership between the three of us. Mark's company did a lot of the work themselves, so we used them as the primary contractor to get the work done. And the whole idea was we were going to allow the stream to flood a lot easier than it was. So we were trying to increase floodplain area. So to where we wanted it, more or less, instead of letting the water go to wherever, it was going at the time. So we were trying to control the flow of the water, minimize the erosion, plant some stuff that helps stabilize the banks to prevent future erosion. And it worked out pretty good. Being Lehigh Country Club, everything's always comes down to timing. And, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen there, as I'm sure most of you guys feel at your own golf courses. But we had 2 hurricanes that fall. It completely washed out the project and it had to get redone.
In the middle of the project, you had the
project. Yeah. I had pictures of a skid steer with nothing but the cab just sticking out of the top of the river. So due to the flooding. But it was interesting. But we worked through it. We had to do a lot of replanting the following year. But it's been very, very successful. We have the riparian barrier along the edge of the stream now. So when it does flood, it filters out a lot of the sediment. So we don't get a whole lot of sediment laying out on the fairways and playing areas and so on. So it's worked out really good from that perspective. It allows the water to get out of the channel easier and then get back into the channel. So
how does a project like that get started on a country club? Is this initiated by you? How did you find this group that you worked with? What was the membership or the leadership at the club like when you were talking about this project? I'm sure it wasn't an inexpensive project. Not that I need to know the dollar figure, but I'm sure this was a fairly lengthy process to get to a point where you actually started construction. How do you start?
I mean, and the permitting that was involved and everything. That's why we were fortunate to be able to work with the Wildlands Conservancy. Our president of the club at the time happened to be the president of the Wildlands
Oh,
Conservancy.
how convenient.
It was very convenient. And, when we were talking about, and he's actually was a banker. He's retired now, but he was a banker at the time by profession. And, he was like, we were talking about the problems with the stream and the erosion and everything else. And he said, we really, you should need to talk to Chris over at Wildlands. And so one thing just led into another. And that's how we got started. We had a bridge on the property that's actually on between our 4th and 11th hole. And it was a very low bridge, and it had a center pillar in the middle of the stream that was causing all kinds of havoc. So, we replaced that whole bridge, which really helped open up the channel as well and prevented a lot of the damming up that was happening there during floods and so on. That was probably one of the most expensive aspects of the project. It was about $250,000 just to replace that bridge.
Wow.
So, but it's been great ever since. So,
how much of this work was done in-house? Any of it?
A little bit. We had sod mats that we were harvesting from on the property and using. And, I actually had member volunteers. I put together a group of people that help us plug in the plants and stuff. Just try to, sell it and give some ownership to the membership. So it worked out really well. Look,
Did this disrupt play at all? Did you have a lot of issues during construction?
We tried to do it in the fall. I mean, obviously, there was some disruption. I mean, when we had key tournaments, we didn't allow work on the golf course, and the bridge actually ended up being replaced in December of that year. So I actually shut down my lower holes in December because they essentially become unplayable, and we create a 9-hole upper course for the members to play through December, January, February. So, so that became shut down, and then we were able to do the real nitty gritty stuff.
You got a number of holes there along that creek bank. So you've got a lot of that property is kind of stuck down along that creek bank. So you were able to shift everything. You got a lot of high up on the clubhouse side, and then a lot of high ground on the back end of the property. So that whole area down there was basically kind of rerouted for the purpose of finishing this?
Yeah. So we had, like I said, we create this 9-hole upper course utilizing essentially, we have a 19th hole, a bye hole, a par 3. That's really nice. So that comes in handy. But with that hole, we can create a little 9-hole course that the members can get around. And then there's another hole up there that they can, they play that alternately, whether it's their first 9 or their second 9. If they're playing 18, they'll play the opposite hole. So it works out. It works out good for me for maintenance as well, or when we do run into issues. 3 years ago when we had that horrific summer and we flooded all the time, I think my golf course in September, it was open in its entirety, I think 5 days.
Yeah, I remember.
Flooding. The 13th hole, a little par 3 that's down along the stream, was essentially unplayable for about 6 weeks. So we were able to use the 19th hole in place of that. And, we had one tournament that was modified that it ended up being a 16-hole tournament because that's all we could play.
Did any of this work have any impact on the Flynn design? I mean, it really pretty much
not at all. Not at all. We were very, very, concerned about that and made sure that it wasn't going to, drastically affect his vision for the course or affect any of the playability from that perspective.
And for the most part, your course is still that Flynn design. It really hasn't changed radically from the 20s, has it?
It really hasn't. I mean, we've worked with Ron Force now for, since the early 90s, about 30 years, ever since I've known you. It was Ron, and that was an interesting story too, how we came about Ron, but, he was very well aware of Lehigh and its Flynn heritage. So when I first dialed him and I picked up the phone, or he picked up the phone, and I identified myself with John Chassard at Lehigh Country Club, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was Toomey and Flynn. So, We had just got through working with Art Hills, who was a great guy and a lot of fun to work with, but he wasn't really looking at the golf course from a restoration perspective. He was looking at it as a more of a renovation into more of a modern type of design. And again, this was in the early 90s. And I mean, we knew we had a Flynn golf course and we knew it was something special. We just didn't know how special at the time, but Ron Force helped us get there. So.
Is Ron a Flynn specialist? I mean, isn't he a restoration guy?
He knows Flynn very well. I mean,
yeah.
knows his a lot of his designs. He's worked on a lot of Flynn courses, but I wouldn't call him a Flynn specialist. I'd call him more of a classic architecture specialist. Ross, Flynn, Tillinghast, so on.
Hey, tell me about the what is the Flynn Cup or the Flynn tournament you guys do? You go rotate from Flynn course in the area?
Yeah, they do one nationally and they do one locally with the other courses in the Philadelphia area. So it rotates from course to course each year, fall of the year, and the pro plays with a group of members. It's really it's become a big deal and a lot of fun. So for the Flynn clubs to participate in.
So let me ask you about your agronomy. You and I have been back and forth on this over 20-some years now.
You want to talk about my sand greens?
Yeah, I want to talk about all of your sand greens. I assume they're all sand greens, right? Oh, no, that's right. They're not. Do you have any sand greens at all? I don't even know anymore.
I do. I have 2 California greens that we built, I don't know, 2006 maybe, as in our short game area. So our 2 practice greens are sand greens. I'm sure that's where your confusion came from.
There's lots of confusion in my head at times, especially when it deals with your course.
Oh, yeah.
You were one of the first people. I mean, you and I go back so far, and of course, I learned probably as much as I know from anybody from you and how about a golf course and how it works. But you were one of the very first superintendents that I got to work with that started really playing with reducing nitrogen. And I remember, many times you'd come to me with silly questions that I thought you were joking and you were really serious. Hey, would it be okay if I got down to a half a pound of nitrogen on my fairways? And I'm like, I don't know if you're joking or not. And it turns out you weren't joking, and I don't know how long that lasted, but you and I have been doing this for a long time, soil testing, and obviously you're dealing very definitively with a biological soil management approach. But how long ago was that? You remember this conversation, but you've been input for a long time.
We had regrassed the greens in the early 90s, 91 or 92, and we methyl bromide them. So I basically killed all the biology in the soil. And went through my first season trying to grow my bent grass greens and had a miserable time with it. Really, I
sterile soil.
Missed my POA, but also realized I sterilized the soil. So conversation with Glenn Smickley, he's the one that put me on to you. Said, listen, you might want to give Joel Simmons a call, and that's how it started.
And I was in your backyard.
You were
pretty closely. You actually were one of the few superintendents has gotten to know or had a chance to meet Jerry Bernetti a couple of times.
Absolutely.
Who was my founding partner and my mentor, mad scientist, and you and Tom Briner over at Fiddler's Elbow were probably the 2 guys that knew Jerry better than anybody in the golf course industry. And I think Jerry had been on your property a few times, as a matter of fact.
Right.
But we've been staring at your soil tests for all these years, and you in fact started to see reductions in inputs and some things coming around after a few years of and quite honestly, back in the 90s, this was all foreign to me. Jerry, I think, understood what he was doing. You and I were probably the novices in the group, and we're just kind of just staring at Jerry and wondering what the heck's this guy talking about? And sure enough, it kind of worked.
It almost, if you remember, we kind of joked about it being, part of the robe club,
You were the first robe wearer.
Because it felt like a cult, because it just like.
It still is.
It wasn't mainstream by any means,
yeah.
But, I saw it work, initially. And So it was encouraging, and it made a lot of sense, and instead of just throwing all these synthetic fertilizers out there, being able to take more of an organic approach and truly feed the soil, because that's what I was after. I was looking for biology, I wanted to increase that in the soil. So it was good. And then building up the soils over the years, and then we did find that we could cut back. And I like a lean golf course. I mean, almost everybody that comes on my golf course goes, "Man, look like this place needs fertilizer." But again, back in the day, I mean, that's the way the golf course was meant to be played. That's how it was designed, and firm and fast. And so I do prefer lean over super green. But there's a balance in there.
But you're never really hungry looking. I mean, I've been on your course probably more than any golf course I know of, and I've never known your property ever to look like it just ran out of juice.
No. Like if you look at it now, I love the look of it now because it's kind of just a little tingy, and it looks a little hungry, although it really isn't. The golf course right now is probably the healthiest it's ever been that I've seen this time of year. But it's been a journey, and like you said, we've kind of, we've tweaked it along the way. It started out with, let's build up an organic base. Let's really push some organic dormancy, is a dormant feed, and a little bit in the spring, a little bit in the fall, back off in the summer, strictly over the top with liquids in the summer. And more and more people started trying, getting on that pathway. And being on it so long right now, my inputs and my dormant feed is really next to nothing.
Yeah, I meant to talk to you about that. I got some bills to pay here.
It's an investment in time. If you do
exactly.
You can back off. So
this was one that when Jerry and I first started talking about this project of ours at EarthWorks, that was never really necessarily a thought process. I think Jerry knew, but I didn't know any of this, and you and I were of about the same age. I mean, so these two guys walk onto your property, this mad scientist, Jerry Bernetti, and this kid following him aimlessly and lost. And we start giving you this line, and you believed it. I mean, you actually started following a biological soil management thing in the 90s when everybody was telling you that, oh, you can't do that. It's way too expensive, and it's not going to work until June. None of that was the case.
Yeah, and again, I don't know why. I mean, I think because I saw the results immediately, and it just felt better because taking that organic approach. I mean, I was getting I felt like what I was doing wasn't exhausting the soil, but it was building up the soil. So I did feel like it was an investment in time and not really completely understanding, as you said. I mean, it was a journey where, you kind of figuring out as you went along, and but it got better and better and better. So I felt a lot more comfortable with it. I liked the idea that I wasn't, throwing a lot of synthetic stuff out there, and from an environmental perspective as well as an expense perspective, the initial investment was well worth it over time.
There's a lot of talk in our industry now about minimum levels of sufficiency nutrients and a lot of folks like that. You've been doing this as long as I've known you. You've been reducing inputs, but you've been doing it, as I would say, the right way. You've been doing it through the soil first and building up that ground. So you've been, you've got a base, and, you virtually have little to no thatch anywhere on this property now, do you?
No, I mean, the only issue we're dealing with thatch, if we deal with it, is on our tees. We did a tee project probably 7 years ago now, and we used Penn Trio sod on top of it. Yeah. And so, a couple of my tees got a little spongy. And again, I used a construction mix that was 70% sand. And if I had to go back, I would do that all different again. But so, again, I'm trying to build the biology, trying to reduce some of the thatch. We use a lot of the 333. Can I say that? on
You
this.
can. The Myco Replenish, Myco Riser product.
Yes,
Riser
yes.
is going to help bring a lot of stuff in there.
But, we essentially punch a solid hole, half-inch hole every few weeks and just let them breathe and throw the 333 over top. And again, I've been getting good results with it. We've top dressed them heavily and, we've controlled the thatch. But that, my fairways have always been, well, not always, but I mean, there was a point in time where I was actually trying to build a little bit more body into the fairways. And but I think they're perfect now. Really
fairways have great playability. I mean,
right where I want them.
Yeah.
So if we can stay on the dry side, the golf course is great. Again, I'm still dealing with soil-based greens. When they built the greens in '26, they were built to retain water because they didn't have irrigation back then, or very limited irrigation. So, rainfall was key to try to retain the moisture in the greens. So for the past 25 years, I've been trying to get it out.
Exactly. You said if you were to do it again, you would have done those tees differently. What would you do differently if you had to?
I do a little bit more of a soil mix,
Dirty it up a little bit.
Dirty it up a little more, yeah. Probably, looking at it, I probably would have blended in some products as well. Initially for the construction, I would have definitely chose the Renovate Plus.
The product you named.
My products.
Your product, you named it, yes, along with other people in this country. But yeah, we give you credit for it. It's yours.
But I think, a lot of times, and I know even, we did some drainage over the last couple of years, and you and I talked about, trying to blend in some Renovate and some 333 with that mix in the drain lines as well. So, there's
a little CEC.
There's it's the thing that's great about this business is it's constantly changing. You're constantly doing new things, and you're always trying to improve on what you've done on the past. But I hate kind of saying this because it gives you some credibility, but I mean, it really is the foundation of my program, and it has been. I mean, it's, when I look at somebody's yard or, it looks really lean. I just like the idea of pounding 5-4-5, because that's what I did on the fairways to get them to where they were. And now my fairways haven't seen 5-4-5, as you've said, for quite a long time.
Like I said, I need to talk to you about that, but that's all good. That was another thing that we found out, that we've learned so much in this process, being that it is a biological process. The soil is going to do most of the work, so we can in fact reduce inputs. And you were the first guy that really showed us that. I mean, like I said when I started this conversation, you kept coming to me and saying, "Well, I'm going to go to 1/2 pound." And I'm like, "Well, John, you need to have a little thrive. You need to push enough to keep everything going. You're still a golf course, but you've certainly been a poster child of understanding that the soil is driving the train, and you don't have to go out there and start damaging that soil." And it's a testament to your agronomy over the years. And we've done a lot of soil testing there, and your soils, when we first started working, were not great. I think we put out a lot of limestone at first.
Yeah, we've
been able to maintain that since.
Good over the years. I mean, they're not bad now. So
no, they're good now. And we don't do a whole lot of soil testing anymore because they're pretty steady. I mean, we do a little snapshots every once in a while, but when we first started working, we were running a lot of soil tests, and quite honestly, we haven't done a whole lot recently.
Right.
Which is good, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And and I'm sure you probably don't go into the office every morning wondering if all the fertility is falling off the table on your fairways, tees, and greens. And
right,
you can get into some of the other issues.
It's the word, because it sounds so like now, but it is it's sustainable. So it's extremely sustainable.
So here's what I really want to talk to you about, because of all the properties that I work with, and as you know, I in particular in 30-some years have been doing this. I've been on a lot of golf courses and worked with a lot of superintendents. But I've been working with you for almost 30 years, and the core of your crew is still on that property. I walked in, last Monday or so, and had lunch with you, and there's all the guys that I've known for 30 years working on your crew. I don't think I can point to a single golf course that I go to on a regular basis where there was more than maybe one guy that has been on that property for any period of time. You've got at least 4, maybe 5 guys. I mean, if you count Ryan, Ryan's been is the baby, and he's been there
23 years now. Ryan's been there, so
he's the baby of the property, and he's there for 23 years. You know, Mikey and Slim. I mean, Nestor, all these guys, Roger. I mean, they're all been there for an unbelievable amount of time. So there has to be a secret. I mean, it can't be all you. I'm sure of that. But what is the secret? And you've been there for 30 some years. So how do you do that?
There's a lot of things. I mean, first and foremost, I feel extremely fortunate. I mean, it is a good club. You know, it's a good membership. The membership has been very supportive in the less better years.
Yeah.
And we all know how that. I mean, it was said to me a long time ago, you're only as good as you are today in this business. And people don't remember yesterday, don't remember last year or 3 years ago, 10 years ago. So, even now with a lot of new members coming in, a lot of young members, a lot of young money, and they could really, they really don't care who John Chassard is. They just want their golf course in good shape. They don't care, how long I've been there, whatever. So, you have to kind of recreate yourself on a regular basis. I've been fortunate because I've had good people around me. I mean, not only on my staff, but in the clubhouse as well. I've had good committees to work with for the most part. My former GM, who was at the club for 40 years, really led the paved the way for that, I would say, because he was really good at identifying people in the membership, getting them involved, and then getting them in the place that, they were on the executive committee. And so, people would get involved. I know for the next 6-8 years who I was going to be dealing with by just seeing how, the chain of command worked, who was coming up through the ranks and so on. And, in this business, it's all about developing relationships and maintaining those relationships. It's one of the things I love about the business. I love the relationship I have with my crew. I love the relationship I have with the other employees in the club. I love the relationship I have with the membership. So it's building on that on a regular basis. I've never really tried to be anything I'm not. If I fail, I'll be the first one to admit it. So hey, listen, that was on me. Okay,
there you go.
Sorry. And they've been supportive. So it's.
So what do you tell a young superintendent? I mean, you've got to have some words of wisdom with a crew that has that longevity and are still willing to work every day. I mean, it seems to me, it feels like family to me when I go there. Now, obviously, I've been, kind of on this peripheral team for almost 30 years now myself, but, I come and go and I feel like family. I mean, these guys are brothers, to each other, and I feel part of that brotherhood. How do you tell a young guy how to develop that level of culture? And I think the word culture at your club is the best word I can use to describe it. You've got a strong culture, and they all feel a part of it, and they obviously come to work wanting to work. How do you do that?
It's really identifying in each person what makes them tick too, and how to motivate them. Some guys, appreciate more like the, feeling involved, like they're helping them make the decisions. Other people just really appreciate, some words of affirmation and a pat on the back. So it's really learning on what drives your employees, and they're all different. It's all different. So that's part of the secret, is unlocking that and then building on that with each person, identifying their strengths and then emphasizing their strengths to them, and then utilizing them in a way where they feel like, they have ownership of the place. They have a stake in it. And it's difficult. I mean, I've had some people that I've had to weed out over the years that, just weren't getting on board. But this spring,
You mean my staff now? Sorry, Jack.
oh, poor
That's
Jack.
a running joke. Jack Higgins, who actually did last week's podcast, was a former employee of yours, and he's now been working with us for the last 11 years.
Now
And,
the backbone of EarthWorks.
we're kidding, Jack. So don't get worked up. But it's worked out extremely well. But some of these guys. I mean, I assume probably most of these guys, short of maybe Ryan, was there when you got there, weren't they?
Yeah, Mike and Slim were. And Nestor came a year after me. So
and they're all within the same age group.
Close. Mike and Slim are a few years older than I am. I mean, they're talking and looking at retirement.
Yeah.
And I've made provisions for that and having their replacements ready. But it's it's interesting because it really is family, and you get as much annoyed with some of these people at times, and you really got to sit them down and give them a talking to. And we actually did that with all my crew yesterday morning. But after a frustrating weekend, so
that's why you're working from home today.
It's never, you can't ever. It's a fine line because you want to encourage them, but yet you don't want to feel like you've arrived. So you're constantly challenging them. I mean, my big conversation yesterday was attention to detail throughout the golf course. And really trying to see the place through the members' eyes, and but yet, it's pulling them together, presenting them with the challenge, and then rewarding them when they pull it off. And this spring, obviously, with everything that's going on, has been extremely challenging. And, for the longest time, we were only working with just my full-time crew. And at one point, what we thought was going to be a substantially reduced salary. And it took a lot to motivate these people to keep coming in every day, because quite frankly, they could have gotten laid off and made more money at the time. Now all that's been rectified and it's all worked out. But, I give them credit because, they take pride in what they do. Yeah. And it shows. And it certainly isn't me. I can't get it all done. But, I always say that, those who can't manage those that can. So, but it's surrounding. You have to surround yourself with good people. You really do.
So you've been able to set up some kind of an exit strategy for some of the older guys on staff. That's wonderful in this day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's kind of has evolved into that without really having a game plan and saying, okay, this is the way it's going to work. But, I've replaced my mechanic, Mike, with a new guy. It's been there for 2 years now. Phenomenal mechanic. Brad, very, very happy to have him.
And Mike is still on staff.
But Mike is still on staff. And part of going into this was Brad having the understanding that he was going to have to work with Mike for a few years, and Mike with the understanding that, all right, you're no longer there's going to be a little bit, 18-month, 24-month transition here where Brad's going to be the man and you're going to be the helper. And Mike's been great with that. So, I utilized, especially this spring, been utilizing Mike on the golf course a lot. And, he's in the shop helping Brad when Brad needs him. But, Mike's got a wealth of experience with the club. I mean, just knowing the irrigation, everything. So, he knows pipes and valves and stuff for, the pool and everything that I have no clue of. So.
Yeah. He's salt of the earth, that man. He's one of the best. I mean, I've known a lot of mechanics in my days, and
Slim used to be the assistant mechanic, and then back in the day when I first started at the club, he was the one taking care of the tennis courts, and then I kind of got him away from that and got him more involved in the shop. And he and Mike grew up as childhood buddies, so the two of them, it was kind of funny. And then that's evolved over time. Now I have, Slim back on the tennis courts again because he's really good with it. So I know having him there, I don't have to think about it. And then he spends the rest of his time out as my irrigation tech. So, but I have other people learning the irrigation, and I have people in place to be able to take over when Slim retires. So,
And you?
and me,
What happens next?
they're going to put me to pasture.
You're going to hang out with your goats for a while and then see what happens.
You know, I was having a conversation with my grounds chairman the other day. I'm 57, and you know, he's 60. He thought I was his age, and he's like 57. He goes, oh, geez. He goes, you got at least another 12 or 13 years here. I was kind of happy to hear that.
So you ripped the bullseye off your back that afternoon and felt pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, it felt good for 12 hours.
Right, exactly. Have you ever felt any real pressure from the club? I mean, any?
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think that's part of the success is knowing that you're replaceable. Yeah. And knowing that, I mean, you have to recreate yourself. You've got to go out there. You got to do things that, you know, are, I don't want to say evolutionary, but yeah, on the cutting edge. I mean, you've got to take chances to a certain degree. And again, I've been fortunate because I've had a lot of support in that regard. You know, mostly it's paid off, but there's been times that it hasn't. So, you know, and you live and you learn. And, you know, they've been patient with me, and, you know, it's been good. It's been good. But because of my crew, because of a lot of things, I mean, I have no idea. None of us knows what next year holds. I mean, I think, you know, golf in general and country clubs in general are going to look really different as time moves forward here. You know, how the clubs come out of this economically and you know, to a certain degree, I think all our expectations are going to have to be back down a little bit. I see budgets being reduced. I see, you know, just for a club to be able to survive. So
you survived the 08 recession. Did you guys go through a lot of rocky roads during that downturn?
Mostly, you know, everything revolves around labor. So, you know, you go through labor freezes. I mean, we're on one now, you know, reduced overtime, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you make adjustments and, you know, you compensate. So
how do you keep morale strong during those times?
It's, you know, you let guys go home a little bit early and you pay them for it. You know, you take off on a Friday, you get all your work done by 11 or 12 o'clock on a Friday, and you get the guys lunch, and, you know, you sit around and just talk and have lunch. And
should I edit this part out?
But you have to do things
You're
like
communicating that, obviously.
Tournament every year. I mean, I used to do little field trips. I took my full-time crew to the golf house over in, you know, Jersey there for the USGA golf house. We went to Yingling Brewery once. I mean, you know, just stuff like that. And rainy days where it's like, okay, you're not going to be able to do anything. And I look at that as a give back day. Yeah. Yeah, you have to do stuff like that occasionally. So, I mean,
I've had a couple lunches where we probably both had to vent a little bit more, and maybe that extra glass of wine helped. But it's been it's been a long road.
So.
You know, I spend a lot of time. I mean, I'm of the same age, obviously, but I spend a lot of time talking to superintendents our age that are all nervous that, you know, I mean, we get to that certain age, and, you know, you've seen so many guys get into that late 50s, haven't been on the golf course for so long. And, you know, and I think some of them, quite honestly, take, you know, assumptions that they're going to have this job forever when it's clearly not the case. And like you said, you know, the golf courses, the membership is always evolving. You're getting newer members, and maybe even some members that have been sons of members. And, you know, there's a lot of dynamics that are constantly at work, especially for those of us at this age and being on the property as long as you have. And the fact that you've been able to survive it, and I think hopefully will continue to survive for the next, what'd you say, 13 years? I won't be able to have lunch with you for 13 more years, but maybe 10. We'll see how
I'll be happy for 10, but I mean, you know, I can't imagine not doing it, you know, so that's why I say, you know, I mean, I have no idea what the future holds. So, I mean, we take it day by day and year by year, but I mean, you know, I'm not going to just stop working in 10 years. So I'd like to be involved in some capacity with the club, and we'll see what that looks like. But, and if that's truly where I'll end up being. but it's it's staying out ahead of things. I think, you have to communicate. There's been times for me, especially when things were rough on the golf course, it'd be really easy to hide in my office, in my shop. Yeah. I've always found that those are the times where you have to make yourself the most visible. And even though it's painful and it hurts, you got to do it. People don't want to see you when the golf course is in great shape, really. Right. I mean, to a certain extent, they take it for granted. But when things are bad, you got to make sure you're seen. They got to know that you're on the property. They got to know and have the confidence that you're doing your job and you're doing all that you can. Yeah. So that's become evident to me over the last 37 years.
Especially the last few that have been so wet.
Yeah, I mean, but it is, and communicate. Get in front of your membership and try to head things off if you can. So it helps.
It's funny coming from my perspective, visiting you as often as I have over the years. I've seen you on those good years, and then of course I've driven around with you on those bad years. I remember a couple of years ago when the flooding was happening, and I thought for sure you were going to have to pull you off of a roof at some point, but you survived it all, thank goodness.
Yeah,
it all worked.
They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there is a lot of truth to that. I mean, and a lot of my peers I talked with were, man, they wanted out. I wanted out, I actually had talked to a couple people about pursuing other interests because I was like, I don't know how much more I can do this. Yeah. But it's when you come through those years that it does make you that much better. And you learn to live that, you can survive the roughest of years. I mean, I had a guy throw Roundup in a spray tank once and go and spray all my intermediates. He thought it was Banner.
So at least it wasn't sabotage, but
the silver lining in that was we got to reseed all our intermediates to one variety of grass. So it was nice
all around. So as you go through the next 10 years, you're going to change your crew quite substantially because obviously Mikey and Slim are going to be gone and probably a couple other folks. And, Ranger will probably be moving on. I mean, how are you going to be able to maintain the culture and the family that you have done so well on in the next 10 years? Is that going to be a huge challenge? Do you think they're going to see what you've already, established?
And you recognize talent in people. So, outside of my, 5-6 key guys, I've got another 5 or 6 key people that are up and comers. And you can tell who's going to be a lifer and who's not. You can tell their interests and their talents, as I said. So, you start developing that, and, you make sure when you get a guy coming through and you know he's a worker and he cares and he takes pride in what he does, you do what you can do to keep him around. I don't necessarily like to think I make promises I can't keep, but I like to at least try to build on that. And if I can't hire someone full time, I'll at least try to work them seasonally and then, lay them off in the winter with that they have the understanding of that. And like, listen, if you can manage this for a couple of years, it could turn into a full-time position. And some people stick through it and they come through it and they do great. And other people bail. So, I mean, it's, I'm always looking for talent. And what I don't have then or what lacks, I send to you. So
exactly. Thank you. And that's also why I don't answer your phone call when you're having bad weeks, because I know what you're going to ask me. And the answer to you is definitely no. So no, you cannot become an employee at EarthWorks, but thank you for asking. Are you finding it hard with this generation? And I don't mean to sound like, okay, boomer, but it's got to be hard. I mean, this has been the single biggest comment or concern that a lot of guys have is that it's just hard to get good talent at this this group. And the second question I always get from anybody is, hey, do you know any good assistants? And they're just, the schools aren't producing what we used to produce. I mean, I know when I was at Rutgers, we had a whole bunch of guys going through. There are not as many going through. The talent is not as clean. At Penn State, the same thing. You finding that? I mean, you're able to get a decent enough pool to start the next generation at Lehigh?
Well, Again, I'm fortunate because I've had a couple people stumble into my lap. Now, I've worked with the H-2B program now for 13 years. I obviously don't have my people right now, but there's provisions to be able to do something in the fall that may guarantee that I have them for next year. So I'm always looking at that. I'm always working that angle because, to me, it's one of the only ways we can survive. I rely on that program, and this year's been a little bit different, but golf's been a little bit different this year as well. So we've adapted, and we're going to make our way through it. But it really is hard finding good people, as you said. And I've gone through a number of hires, and that they don't, if they're going to work out or not. You keep cycling through it. Every now and then you get lucky, and I've been fortunate. I guess I've gotten lucky with some people that I'm working on right now, and nurturing, developing, that hopefully they can step up and take the challenge when it comes. Out of my high school and my college kids that come through, again, some of them are really, really good kids, and some of them now have been working for me for 4 or 5 years, and they're going on to bigger and better things for them. But I've always found that if I have a good kid that's working for me and he's got a friend, generally that friend's pretty good too, and then that guy's got a friend, and it just keeps getting kind of trickles down. So from that perspective, it's good. But again, you got to know how to motivate these guys. You got to know how to talk to them. Biggest issue is the phones. I mean, in one respect, I like having them to have a phone on a golf course because they can get a hold of me right away. And we do use it as a way of